Before we get into today's message, the next 2 weeks you definitely want to be here, and I definitely am coveting your prayers. We're going to do a short 2-week series called What Would Jesus Say To? And next week I'm going to talk about what would Jesus say to Hillary Clinton. And then the following Sunday I am going to talk about what would Jesus say to Donald Trump. So I need your prayers. I need volunteers to write my sermons, actually. I have no idea what to say. Anyway, well, let's jump into this. One of the things I loved about my church growing up was my pastor, Bill Walker, great man. He was a missionary in Japan before he came to our church. And there were a lot of things that our church didn't do well. We made no inroads into the community whatsoever, by and large. We studied the Bible, but everyone else around us could go to hell because we're just going to study the Bible. We're cool. We saw very few people come to Christ. We had the people were wonderful, but it was like, what is happening here, right? Some of you have come from churches like that. But the one thing we nailed, the one thing we were great as a church, and the one thing that deeply, profoundly affected my spiritual DNA is that we were committed to missions. We were committed, I think, because of his experience, because of his understanding of the nature of Christianity, that Christianity is a sending religion. Christianity is a religion that goes rather than stays. It studies on the road rather than homes. It is a going religion. So because of that, we had people coming to our church all the time from Poland and Russia and Africa and South America, meeting missionaries and hearing their stories. And it was just an amazing, amazing experience as a church. Now, just this week, friends of mine, Terry and Amy Ruff, I met them because they were mission leaders at Northside Christian Church in New Albany, Indiana. None of you know who that is, but they're very near and dear to my heart, that church and those people. This was one of the first churches that came on board and supported our church when I was going around the country raising money. And they opened the doors for a lot of other churches. Not coincidentally, they were the team that sent a missions group out here to help us do our very first kids camp at Black Rock Park before we launched our church. And Terry and Amy were volunteers in the church that essentially rose to prominence in terms of serving missionaries and missions. And so much so that when he was able to take early retirement, he decided, let's become missionaries. You know, right at the point where you've been working your whole life and you have enough money to go retire in Florida and hike up your pants and go eat at buffets at 3 and just kick back, they were like, no, this whole time has been in preparation for missions. And so God called them to do mission work in Ghana, Africa. This week, as I was going through Facebook, this post came across my feed. March 2nd, 2016, robbery. About 1 a.m. yesterday, thieves tied up our employees and broke in our home. They tried coming in through the window in the front of the house and gave up. Then they tried coming in the front door and gave up, so they went around to the back of the house and knocked a hole in the cement wall in our bedroom big enough for a small person to climb through. Then they proceeded ransacking our bedroom and broke our bedroom door down to the kitchen and entered into the rest of the house looking for money. It seems the only thing they were looking for was cash, and was evidenced by everything they turned upside down, like cameras and media kits and projectors, and left everything scattered everywhere. They also stole our motorbike that we used for ministry, but unfortunately we found it out of gas. The police have checked it for fingerprints, on and on. The most disturbing loss was a $5,000 emergency fund, evacuation fund we had hidden as required by team expansion. Essentially, when you send missionaries into unsettled areas, they all have to have go packs, essentially, where if unrest happens, they have to have cash, people, the route, everything to be ready to go at a moment's notice. So as you can imagine, they said, we're processing many emotions, so please pray for us as we implement additional security measures to try and prevent this from happening again. All robberies have taken place while no one was in the house. Now this is different. We know it as someone who knows us because they always know where to look. Now, these people are heroes of mine. You know, they've gotten to the point where they are selfless disciples of Jesus. And now here's the thing. When I was growing up as a kid in my church, I heard stories like that all the time. And whether it was their intent or not, I grew up with this idea that there were two types of Christians. There were the average Christians, like you and me, that basically our job is to go to church and to give money and prayer for the professional Christians who go do the really important stuff. And it's no wonder that when I became a Christian at the age of 18 and was willing to do anything and go anywhere, I wanted to become a missionary because that's all I heard my entire life. Now, my greatest fear right now for our church is that I've given you this exact same mistaken impression. That over the years, as we've supported heroic missionary efforts in India, in the face of severe persecution, in church planting in El Salvador, visionary leaders in Haiti and Kenya with thousands of children using our resources and our prayer and our finances, as we've helped selfless women and men who are rescuing marginalized people in northern Iraq and Cambodia and now Uganda, that somehow, first of all, we need to be doing that, but my unfortunate hunch is that people in our church have the impression that those are the people who are the missionaries who are doing the important stuff. Our job is simply to send money. There's you and me over here, and then the really important people over there. What I want to do is I want to look at a passage from the Bible that basically upends that whole perspective, and it's found in a book of the New Testament called the book of Acts. Now, the New Testament, for those of you who are new here this morning, the New Testament essentially is half of the Bible, which starts with Jesus and his mission that he gave Christians. And there are 27 books or letters in this New Testament. One of them is the book called Acts, which is called the Acts of the Apostles. It's the history of the early church. In fact, it follows two characters, a guy named Peter, that many of you have heard of, and then a guy named Paul. First half is Peter, second half is Paul. Anyway, the writer of this, a physician by the name of Luke, is researching the history of the church accurately. William Ramsey, by the way, was a 19th century historian who went out to prove that Christianity was wrong. He was a history professor in England, turned around and used the book of Acts, and he said, I'm going to prove that the Bible's not reliable. So he took the book of Acts as his starting point and researched historically all of the cities in extreme detail that the Apostle Paul and that Luke wrote about, and he came back and said, holy crap, this thing is utterly accurate. And he became a Christian. So the book of Acts begins this way in chapter 1 with a story of Jesus' very last words. And he says this, do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father promised. You and I, we like gifts. Jesus gave a gift. What is the gift? John baptized with water, but in a few days you're going to be baptized with the Holy Spirit. Like you can imagine, in the same way, water's coming over you and empowering you totally. The Holy Spirit is going to come over you. But why? When you have the Holy Spirit completely overpower you, what's the whole point of that? He said in verse 7, or in verse 8, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. Now, what in the world does that mean? What is Jesus talking about? And what in the world does this have to do with missionaries? Take a look at this map right here. This is a map of Palestine. This is modern-day Israel. And you're going to notice that there's probably a name or two on here that you might recognize. The city of Jerusalem, for instance, where the church started. The early church started in Nazareth. Why is Nazareth famous? Anybody know? Who was born in Nazareth, right? Who's from Nazareth? Jesus. His early years were in Nazareth, right? Capernaum was Jesus' hometown. He was a sea guy, grown up by the water, huge lake. All of his buddies were fishermen. They were entrepreneurs, right? And Jesus comes along and he says, my work is done on the cross. I died on the cross. I'm ready to send you out now. I want you to go to Jerusalem because I'm going to hit you with inside internal power like you've never experienced before, because I'm going to ask you to do some very hard things. And if I'm not filling you up and empowering you, you're not going to get it done. So he said, what I want you to do is I want you to start in Jerusalem, and then you see these bigger words, these bolded words, Judea, Samaria, Galilee, Syrophoenicia. What they are is these are just general regions, okay, from Roman politics, right? Judea was like our Montgomery County, okay? So he said, I want you to go from Jerusalem to Judea, and then Samaria was really weird because these were people who were heretics, people who didn't really follow the Jewish religion. They were considered gross pagans. So we'll consider Samaria our New Jersey, okay? So, and then I want you to go from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, all the way to the ends of the earth, okay? Now, what is he saying? When we think of missionaries, the modern day conception is you go all the way to the end of the world. Jesus' idea, when he's thinking about people who are going to follow him, and I want you to write this down. Missionaries are followers of Jesus who help people find their way back to God from the ends of their driveway to the ends of the earth. Mission work begins at the end of your driveway and mine, and it extends all the way to the ends of the earth. In other words, every single Christian in this room is a missionary. Every single one of us. There's not a person in this room who isn't a missionary. Terry and Amy Ruff are missionaries, yes, but we're missionaries too. A missionary is not where you are, it's what you do wherever you are. We're doing this talk today, called it Everything We Learned About Evangelism. We learned in the 90s, and I love that Nirvana line. Here we are now, entertain us. If there was ever a line that captured a generation's yearning for something more, where we fill it with all kinds of stuff, it's that one. So bored, so looking for meaning, so looking for a seat at the table where we can actually do something important with our lives that's going to unify us. And in walks our opportunity. Jesus said, you're going to be my witnesses to the people in your cul-de-sac, at the end of your street, that are on the cube or the office or at the end of the line all during the week. And my question is, what would happen if you and I actually viewed ourselves as missionaries? What would happen? I remember, complete pagan growing up. I was in church, but I had nothing to do with it. It was partly because I was rebellious and partly because our church it was terrible. It was. Part of the reason we do a lot of things that we do, because I'm like, what would my church do? Let's do the exact opposite. So I became a Christian at 18, and some of my friends, it was shocking. Eventually, what I did is all of my friends that I used to carouse and hang out with, I helped them all become Christians. And so I had led within a matter of 3 or 4 months about 24 of my friends to become Christians. And someone said, you ought to be a missionary. I'm like, well, I'm going to be a missionary. I just don't know where it is. And a friend of mine said, why don't you be a missionary to the United States? And I'm like, you can't do that. And so anyway, what we used to do on Friday night is we used to go up to the campus of Ohio State University, and we're like, we're going to help people who were coming in and out of the bars looking to get drunk and looking to hook up. We're going to help those people because those people really need it. No one ever told me, that's probably not the best strategy. You ever talk to a drunk person about Jesus? Oh, they'll talk for hours, right? Oh, bring it on, right? So we would have these conversations on the sidewalk, and it was enlightening and empowering and crazy and stupid. Remember when Tim Tebow was all big? Remember he was like all into Jesus, and everyone's like, what an idiot. I know, seriously, because what an idiot, because he's not going out having sex with girls and abusing his body with drug and alcohol. How stupid is he? Well, he was kind of weird because he was overly, tone it down on the Jesus thing, right? You're turning more people off. But hey, you know what? He was 20. I remember what I was like at 18. I was like Tim Tebow on crack. I mean, it was like, I share this because I'm on High Street. I'm trying to get these drunk college students, right, to become Christians. And up walks to me this guy who looked like he was about the age of my dad. he comes up and he was like, can I have some money because I don't have anything to eat? And someone had given me the line, if a homeless person comes up to you and asks for money, what do? Don't give them the money. What are they going to do with the money? They're going to go drink, right? So I just said, no, I'm sorry, I can't give you money, but I'll buy you food. And then he said, okay. And I'm like, well, I just told you that to get rid of you. I didn't want to buy you food, right? And he was like, oh, I was like, okay. So I walked with him over to a restaurant, and we sat down. He had a plate of food. And I said, God's working on me. I was like, idiot, just ask him. So I was like, tell me your story, because you look like a really sharp guy. He said, you don't want to hear my story. I said, I want to hear your story. He said, I came home one day for my job. I was a vice president of a corporation in the area. You've probably heard of the company. And I found my wife with our neighbor. And one thing led to another. We were extricating ourselves from each other's lives, and in the process of the divorce and all of that, I started drinking. And it started getting worse and worse and worse, and finally I lost custody of the kids, and I couldn't do my job anymore. I lost my job, they let me go, and so I moved into my car, and eventually I started sleeping in my car over here on High Street, because there are a couple places that will give you food. They're closed right now, and here I am. He said, and he swore, he said, you want to know the damnedest thing? He said, you see that school? I graduated from there with a master's degree. And I did something really crazy. I leaned over and I was like, has anybody ever told you about Jesus? Because he changed me recently. And I think he can help you. I don't know the answers to all of these questions you're asking, but you need to talk to someone way smarter than me. But I know what you're looking for ultimately is him. And I led him to Jesus, and I baptized him, and I connected him with a pastor friend of mine at a church campus, and he started attending, and he got his life back together. Now, I share this because I was Tim Tebow on crack. I was the worst possible person to talk to this guy, a stupid, pompous, misdirected 18-year-old kid. Imagine what would happen among your relational network if you became a missionary. With your wisdom and talent and ability to lead and see possibilities, what would happen if we all viewed ourselves as missionaries now? How much could we help people around us find their way back to God? That's the point of Christianity. Jesus came and died on the cross 2,000 years ago, not so we could sit in a building, be entertained, go home, and get on with our lives. Jesus came 2,000 years ago, died on the cross so he could make all of us missionaries so we could change the world. You have the ability to do that, and you know you do. It's just a matter of shifting the thinking a little bit and then becoming intentional with the people around you. Now, speaking of not being the Tim Tebows, Mike Bechtel, an author, was being interviewed by World Magazine. He was talking about how bad it is when Christians engage in what he calls spam evangelism. You know, we all hate getting spammed with email. Human beings hate getting spammed with pitches, especially about Jesus. And he was talking about this concept in the magazine, and he used a pretty good illustration. He said, for instance, I had a friend that I was in college with who bet me that he could get a bunch of girls to kiss him out of the blue. So he said, my friend went to downtown Phoenix, down in the center square there, and he said, I'm going to walk up to 100 women, and I'm going to ask them, will you please kiss me on the lips? He said, so my friend was bragging later that on the 98th try, this beautiful woman leaned over and kissed him on the lips. He said, can you believe how amazing that was? And he was like, no, dude. And he said this, he said, I wondered about the other 97 women who might be more hardened than ever, more suspicious and more wary of men approaching them on the street. You know, how traumatized these women are now that there's this dude walking around the street. Will you please make out with me right now? He said the church is a lot like that, and Christians can get like that when they get serious about their faith. On one hand, They have the potential to develop relationships and be normal with people. On the other hand, it says, I think a lot of believers have been hardened by aggressive witnessing techniques. Now, when I say everything I learned about evangelism, I learned in the 90s, I learned that there are people looking for genuine friendships who aren't weird, who aren't trying to sell them something and shoving it down their throat. They're looking for friends, but listen to me. They're not looking for friends who are going to keep their mouth shut, but friends who will point them to Jesus, not to a church, not to a building, to a denomination, to Jesus. It's then about people who will take every possible opportunity to actually gently guide someone into a relationship with Jesus. I'll talk to Christians all the time. It's the craziest thing. Bill and I have been working together for 15 years. Who would have known? He was a Christian and I was a Christian. Isn't that the craziest thing? I said, no, that's not the craziest thing. That's the saddest thing I've heard in a long time. Can you imagine the first followers of Jesus working on the same floor together and both of them don't know each other's Christians? Like, you were going to do so much positive good and have such positive influence, people are going to notice. It's just going to happen. So what would happen if we just started thinking of ourselves differently? Chuck Swindoll said one time, Jesus didn't say, you might be my witnesses, or you could be my witnesses, or even you should be my witnesses. But you will be my witnesses. And so this week, what would happen if tomorrow morning, when you went into your office, you were like, I'm going to be a missionary? So you notice all throughout our property and website and different places, we have a phrase, #PrayForOne. Now, a couple years ago, we started talking about that, and I was like, every time you get up in the morning, pray for one. And then people started saying, I'm praying for one. My grandmother's sick, and I prayed for her today. I'm like, listen, I know Grandma Johnson. I love her. That's not what we're talking about. What we're praying for is we're praying for one more. One more person. Jesus told the story one time. You want to know what God's like? I'll tell you what God's like. God is an awful lot like a shepherd who's got 100 sheep, and he notices, crap. And then he leaves 99 of them and goes wandering through the mountains, picking up that one sheep and bringing it back and setting it down. And Jesus says, you want to know what? There are a lot of religious people who are like the 99 who were complaining about the people who were going looking for the lost sheep. He said, you want to know a little secret? God is that shepherd. God has been pursuing you from the moment you were born to bring you back to him. He's an awful lot like the shepherd, willing to leave the 99 to go after the one. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to do that at work, to be the gracious, kind, normal, but open and persistent Christian, positively impacting the people around you? Missionaries are followers of Jesus who help people find their way back to God from the ends of the driveway to the ends of the earth. Okay, so I want to talk to those of you who aren't Christians, and I want to talk to those of you who are Christians. Undoubtedly, usually about a third of people in the room are people who were just checking it out, making fun of me under their breath. That's cool. Glad you're here. If I were in your shoes, I would do the exact same thing. I say all the time, I am so glad I got converted when I was 18, because if it tried to happen when I was 45, I would have laughed in your face. So the fact that you're here and you're thinking tells me a lot about your humility and the potential for God to use you. For those of you who aren't convinced, I have a little request. The Christians in the room don't have any friendships left with non-Christians. We don't. We have spent so much time, now that our lives have been changed, looking inward, that you people are the only ones left with friendships with people that are far from God. Yeah, we know people, but it's not like we know them and they trust us. There's this story in the Gospel of John, in John chapter 4, where there's this woman who was a serial adulterer. Is at a well. Jesus walks up to her, and she said, hey, do you need some water? Can I have some water? They have this conversation going back and forth. Then he leans over, he's like, if you really knew who you're talking to, you would ask for living water and he would give it to you. And she was thinking, that's weird, but they keep talking. He brings up this conversation about who he is and the power that he has over life in general. And she becomes so mesmerized by the power of God working through him that she runs back to her village and gathers everyone and says, quick, come out to the well. I want to show you a person who told me everything I ever did in my life. And the implication is, but didn't judge me. And it says, many people in her village believed in Jesus. And I just think that's the potential for those of you who are here, and you have, I got to be honest, you have $1 million questions that Christians have been giving 2-cent answers to, and more than likely what we should have done is just shut up and loved you. We apologize for that. So you have legitimate questions, legitimate concerns, and so what I want to say is, God can still use you to powerfully affect people's lives. And so if you're here, let's just be honest. So like at the very worst, what we're doing here is like neutral. You know what I'm saying? What's the worst going on here? Oh, we're trying to save 2-year-olds from getting sex trafficked in Uganda. That's terrible. Yeah, all those Christians are hypocrites. Come on. So I want you to bring friends next week. I want you to reach out to your friends. I want you to start praying to a God that you may not even believe in. I want you to start actually the process of following Jesus and getting people to join you, even when you're not even figured that out yet. Now, I want to speak to those of you who are Christians. When was the last time you somehow were responsible for influencing someone to actually become a Christian yourself? I want you to experience that honor and that privilege of being used by God, the Holy Spirit working through you, to being instrumental to leading someone else to faith. During our time of communion, what we're going to do right now is we're going to remember Jesus' sacrifice. When we take communion, it's just not a ritual. It's a time where the bread represents his body and the cup represents his blood. And when we're doing that, we're remembering and reflecting upon the sacrifice that he made. But what I want you to do is while you're thinking and meditating during the time of communion, I want you to pray a simple prayer. God, give me your heart for people who don't know you yet. God, give me your heart for people who don't know you yet. Change me, make me into the missionary of love and kindness and grace that you created me to be. And so in a moment, the trays are going to come. I want you to take the bread. I want you to take the cup. And after everyone has been served, we'll take together.